My own son put his hands on me that night, and I swear on my late wife's grave, I thought I was going to die right there in my own driveway. But death would have been easier than what came next. What came next was a kind of revenge so perfect, so devastating, that even now, 3 years later, I sometimes wonder if I went too far. But before I tell you how I destroyed my son's life in a single morning, I need you to understand how we got there. And I need you to comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because this story could happen to anyone, anywhere. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you died for, if you've ever had your heart ripped out by the person you love most in this world, then you're going to want to hear every single word of what I'm about to tell you. Hit that subscribe button now, because by the end of this, you're going to understand why sometimes the people closest to us are the ones capable of hurting us the most. My name is Robert Kellerman, and I'm 63 years old. I raised 4 kids mostly on my own after my wife Margaret died of cancer when our youngest was only 8. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to keep food on the table and clothes on their backs. I sacrificed everything, my dreams, my health, my happiness, so they could have better lives than I did. And of all my children, Michael was the one I was most proud of. My eldest son, 35 now, with a successful career in corporate finance, a beautiful wife named Sarah, and 2 kids who called me Grandpa Bob with voices that could melt your heart. Michael was everything I hoped he'd become: smart, ambitious, successful. But success, I learned, can change a person in ways you never see coming. Growing up in Detroit in the 1960s, I learned early that respect was everything. My father, God rest his soul, was a union man at the Ford plant, and he taught me that family comes first, always. You protect your own, you provide for your own, and you never, ever raise your hand against your own blood. I carried those values into my own marriage and family. When Margaret and I had Michael in 1988, followed by Jennifer, David, and little Amy, I made a promise that I'd be different from my father. Better. I'd listen more, yell less, and make sure my kids knew they were loved every single day. Michael was special from the beginning. While other toddlers were playing with blocks, he was trying to read. By kindergarten, he was doing math problems that stumped kids twice his age. Margaret used to joke that we'd created a little genius, and maybe she was right. When the cancer took Margaret in 2001, Michael stepped up like a man, even though he was only 13. He helped with his siblings, never complained about the responsibilities that fell on his young shoulders. During those dark months when I was barely holding it together, working 16-hour days just to keep us afloat, Michael was my rock. "Dad, we're going to be okay," he told me one night after Amy had finally fallen asleep crying for her mother. "I'll help with everything. We'll make it work." And we did make it work. Michael graduated valedictorian from high school, got a full scholarship to Northwestern, majored in finance, and landed a job at Hartwell & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious investment firms, right out of college. By 30, he was making more money than I'd ever seen in my life. He bought a house in Winnetka, the kind of neighborhood I used to drive through just to dream about. He married Sarah, a sweet girl from a good family, and they had 2 beautiful children, Emma, now 7, and little Jake, who just turned 5. I was so proud. At family gatherings, I'd watch him in his expensive suits, talking about quarterly reports and market projections, and I'd think about all those nights I fell asleep at the kitchen table, exhausted from my second job, dreaming of exactly this moment. But somewhere along the way, something changed. It started small, little comments here and there. "Dad, you really shouldn't wear that shirt to Emma's school play. It's not exactly the right image. Maybe you could park down the street when you come visit?" The neighbors noticed these things. "I've been thinking, and I really think you should consider selling the house. Moving into something smaller. More appropriate for your stage of life." The house. The same house where Margaret and I brought home all 4 babies. Where we celebrated first steps and first words. Where she spent her final months, looking out the kitchen window at the garden she'd planted with her own hands. "It's not about the money, Dad," Michael would say, using that patient voice people use when they think you're too old to understand. "It's about practicality. The maintenance, the property taxes, all those stairs. What if you fall? What if something happens? But I knew what it was really about. It was about the fact that my 1,200 square foot ranch house with its chain link fence and overgrown lawn didn't fit the image Michael was trying to create. His success was supposed to lift all of us up, but instead, it seemed to be creating distance between us. Still, I told myself it was just the stress of his job, the pressure of providing for his own family. I made excuses because Michael was my son, and I loved him more than my own life. The first time he spoke to me like I was a servant instead of his father was at Emma's 6th birthday party last year. I'd brought my famous chocolate cake, the one Margaret's recipe, the one all the kids used to beg for. But when I walked into their pristine kitchen with my slightly lopsided homemade cake, Sarah's face fell. "Oh, Bob, you didn't need to, we ordered from that bakery downtown. The one with the custom decorations." Michael appeared at my shoulder. "Dad, next time maybe just ask first?" We kind of had everything planned out. I stood there holding my cake, feeling suddenly ancient and stupid. Around us, Sarah's parents were setting up professional photography equipment. Her mother was arranging imported flowers. Her father was testing some expensive wine he brought. And there I was, 62 years old, holding a homemade cake like some kind of charity case. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I just wanted to contribute something." "I know, Dad. I know." Michael's hand landed on my shoulder, but it felt more condescending than comforting. "Why don't you just put it in the kitchen? Maybe we can serve it later." We never served it later. I found it in the garbage the next morning, still in my favorite cake pan, the one Margaret gave me for our 10th anniversary. That should have been my warning. That should have been the moment I realized my son was no longer the boy who promised me we'd make it work. But love makes you blind to things you don't want to see. And I wasn't ready to see that the son I'd sacrificed everything for had grown up to be ashamed of me. The breaking point came 6 months later, on a Tuesday evening in October that started out like any other day but ended with me questioning everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and love. The call came at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember the exact time because I was watching the news, and the anchor was just starting the weather report when my phone rang. "Dad?" Michael's voice was strained, different. "I need a favor. A big one." My heart immediately went into overdrive. When your kids call sounding like that, your mind goes to all the dark places, accidents, emergencies, hospitals. "What's wrong? Is everyone okay?" "Everyone's fine. It's just... Dad, I'm in a jam. A real jam. Remember I told you about the Morrison account? The big merger we've been working on?" I didn't remember, but I said yes anyway. Michael's work was so far beyond my understanding that most of our conversations about it went over my head. "Well, there's been a complication. A big one. I need to get to the Morrison estate in Lake Forest tonight, like right now, with some documents that could save the entire deal. But Sarah has the car, she's at her book club, and I can't reach her. What about an Uber? A taxi? Dad, this is Lake Forest. It's a 40-minute drive, and I need to be there in 30 minutes. Plus, these documents, they're sensitive. I can't just trust them to some random driver." I was already reaching for my keys. "I'll be right there." "Are you sure? I know your night vision isn't what it used to be, and the roads are a little wet from the rain earlier." "Michael, I've been driving for 47 years. I think I can manage a trip to Lake Forest." The drive to his office took me 12 minutes. Michael was waiting in the parking garage, pacing back and forth with a leather briefcase clutched in his hand. He looked stressed, more stressed than I'd ever seen him. "Thank God," he said, climbing into my passenger seat. "Dad, I can't tell you how much this means to me. If we lose this account..." "We won't lose anything," I said, pulling out of the garage. "Just tell me where we're going." The first 20 minutes of the drive went fine. Michael was on his phone most of the time, making calls, sending texts, occasionally giving me directions in a distracted voice. I was actually feeling good, Useful, important, needed. It had been a long time since one of my kids had asked me for help with something that actually mattered. But then we hit the construction zone. Highway 94 northbound was down to one lane, and traffic was crawling. What should have been a 30-minute drive was turning into an hour. I could see Michael getting more and more agitated beside me, checking his watch every 30 seconds. "Dad, we need to move faster." "Son, there's nowhere to go. We're all stuck in the same traffic." "What about the shoulder?" "Just for a little bit." "The shoulder is for emergencies." "This is an emergency." "Dad, you don't understand. If I don't get these documents to Morrison by 7 o'clock, we lose a $15 million account." $15 million. That's my entire year's commission. I looked at the clock on my dashboard, 6:23 p.m. The Morrison estate was still 15 minutes away, even without traffic. "Maybe there's an alternate route," I suggested. "There's no alternate route. Dad, please. Just use the shoulder for a mile or two. Everyone does it. Look." He pointed ahead of us, where I could see a few cars had indeed pulled onto the shoulder, and were slowly creeping forward. "Those people are breaking the law. Those people are being practical. Dad, please. I'm begging you. This account means everything to me. Everything." I stared ahead at the endless line of brake lights, then at my son's desperate face. Against every instinct I had, every principle my father had taught me, I flicked on my turn signal and eased onto the shoulder. For about 2 miles, it worked perfectly. We were moving at 30 miles per hour while the regular traffic sat motionless. Michael was back on his phone, sounding relieved, telling someone we'd be there in 10 minutes. But then I saw the flashing lights in my rearview mirror. "Michael," I said quietly. He looked up from his phone. "What?" "State trooper." The color drained from his face. "Shit. Shit, shit, shit." I pulled over as far as I could, which wasn't very far given that we were already on the shoulder. The trooper took his time walking up to my window, they always do. I rolled it down and had my license and registration ready. "Good evening, sir. Do you know why I pulled you over?" "Yes, officer. I was driving on the shoulder." "I'm sorry. My son here has a business emergency, and I made a bad judgment call." The trooper was young, maybe 28, with that stone-faced expression they teach them in academy. He looked at my license, then at Michael, then back at me. "Mr. Kellerman, driving on the shoulder is illegal except in designated areas or actual emergencies. Business meetings don't qualify as emergencies." "I understand, officer. I'm sorry. I'm going to need to write you a citation. The fine is $450, plus court costs." $450. That was more than I spent on groceries in a month. "Officer." Michael leaned across me, putting on his most charming smile. "Officer, I'm sorry, I'm Michael Kellerman with Hartwell and Associates. I convinced my father to drive on the shoulder. This is entirely my fault. I have a client meeting that could literally save my career, and I pressured him into this." The trooper's expression didn't change. "Are you the one driving, sir?" "No, but..." "Then you're not the one getting the ticket." He walked back to his patrol car to write the citation. Michael slumped back in his seat. $450. "Jesus, Dad." "I'll pay it," I said quietly. "It was my decision." "You'll pay it? On what? Your Social Security check?" The contempt in his voice hit me like a physical slap. I turned to look at him, really look at him. My son. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed everything for. "I'll figure it out," I said. We sat in silence for the next 5 minutes while the trooper did his paperwork. When he finally came back with the ticket, it was 6:47 p.m. "Here you go, Mr. Kellerman. Drive safely, and stay in the legal lanes." "Yes, sir." "Thank you, officer." I pulled back into traffic, legal traffic this time. Michael was back on his phone, but I could hear the conversation wasn't going well. "Morrison?" "Yes, it's Michael Kellerman." I know, we said 7. There was an emergency, No, sir, I understand. Yes, sir, I'll call you tomorrow. He hung up and stared out the window. The meeting's off, he said flatly. Morrison went with another firm. We drove the rest of the way to Lake Forest in complete silence. When we finally reached the Morrison estate, a mansion that looked like something out of a movie, all the lights were off except for the porch light. $15 million, Michael said to no one in particular. $15 million. The drive back to his office was even quieter. I kept waiting for him to say something. Thank you for trying. Sorry you got a ticket. We'll figure out the money together. Anything. But he didn't say a word. When I dropped him off at his car, he got out without looking at me. Michael, I called after him. He stopped but didn't turn around. It'll be okay, son. There will be other accounts. He stood there for a long moment, and when he finally turned around, there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Something cold and angry and cruel. Will it, Dad? Will it really be okay? Because I just lost the biggest commission of my career because you couldn't drive 5 miles on a shoulder without getting caught. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't pay my mortgage. Sorry doesn't pay for Emma's private school or Jake's piano lessons. Sorry doesn't fix anything. He walked to his car, got in, and drove away without another word. I sat in that parking garage for 20 minutes, staring at the ticket in my hand, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. $450. A lost job opportunity for Michael. And something broken between us that felt like it might never be repaired. But that was nothing compared to what was waiting for me the next time I saw my son. 3 weeks passed before Michael spoke to me again. 3 weeks of calling and getting voicemail, of texting and getting no response, of driving by his house and seeing his car in the driveway but getting no answer when I knocked. I paid the ticket, of course. $450 came out of money I'd been saving to fix the furnace before winter. I sent Michael a picture of the receipt, thinking maybe it would help. He never acknowledged it. Jennifer called me during the second week. Dad, what happened with Michael? He won't talk about it, but Sarah says he's been in a terrible mood ever since you two went on some business trip together. I told her the whole story, the traffic, the shoulder, the ticket, the lost account. When I finished, there was silence on the other line. That's it, Jennifer finally said. That's what he's mad about. I lost him $15 million, honey. You didn't lose him anything, Dad. Traffic isn't your fault. Bad luck isn't your fault. And driving on the shoulder was his idea. But I made the choice. Dad, stop. Just stop defending him. You did him a favor, and it didn't work out, and now he's acting like a spoiled brat. This isn't about money or business deals. This is about Michael being ashamed of you, and using this as an excuse to justify it. Jennifer's words stung because somewhere deep down, I knew she was right. But Michael was my son, and I kept hoping that time would heal whatever was broken between us. The call finally came on a Thursday evening. Dad, I need you to drive me somewhere tomorrow. No hello. No apology. No acknowledgement of the 3 weeks of silence. Just another demand for help. Of course, son. Where do we need to go? I have a presentation at the Riverside Golf Club. It's a breakfast meeting with some potential investors from New York. Sarah needs the car for something with the kids. The Riverside Golf Club. I'd heard of it, one of those exclusive places where membership costs more than most people make in a year. The kind of place where Michael belonged now, and I definitely didn't. What time should I pick you up? 7 a.m. And Dad, this is important. Really important. These investors could make up for the Morrison account and then some. I'll be there. And Dad? Maybe wear something nice. You know. Professional. I spent an hour that night going through my closet, trying to find something that would meet Michael's standards. I settled on my best suit, the navy blue one I bought for Margaret's funeral 13 years ago. It was a little loose now. I'd lost weight since then. But it was clean and pressed, and the best I had. I arrived at Michael's house at exactly 7 a.m. He was waiting in his driveway, pacing back and forth while talking on his phone. When he saw me, he held up a finger. Wait. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching my 35-year-old son conduct business on his front lawn, wondering when I'd become someone whose time didn't matter. Finally, he hung up and approached my car. But instead of getting in, he knocked on my window. I rolled it down. Ready to go? Michael looked at me for a long moment, his eyes taking in my suit, my carefully combed hair, the effort I'd put into looking presentable for his important meeting. Dad, there's been a change of plans. What kind of change? The meeting got moved. It's not a breakfast meeting anymore. It's an evening reception. Very formal. Very high-end. I nodded, confused. Okay. What time do you need me to pick you up? That's the thing. I don't need you to drive me anymore. Sarah's schedule changed, so she can take me. I stared at him. So, you don't need me at all? Right. Michael, I've been up since 5:30. I put on my best suit. I drove 20 minutes to get here. I know, Dad, and I appreciate it. I really do. But plans change in business. You understand. There was something in his voice, something that made me realize this had never been about needing a ride. This had been about testing me, about seeing if I'd jump when he called. About proving to himself that he could summon his father like a servant, and dismiss him just as easily. I understand, I said quietly. Great. Thanks for being flexible. He started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Dad? Maybe next time, just wait for me to call you instead of calling me so much. I've been busy with work, and all the missed calls, it's kind of overwhelming. I drove home in silence, still wearing my funeral suit, wondering how the boy who used to hug me goodnight had turned into a stranger who treated me like an inconvenience. But that humiliation was nothing compared to what was coming. The real breaking point came 2 months later, on a cold Saturday evening in December. Michael called me at 6 p.m., and this time, there was panic in his voice. Dad, I need you to come pick me up. Right now. What's wrong? Where are you? I'm at O'Brien's pub on State Street. My car won't start, and Sarah's at her sister's place with the kids. I've been drinking, so I can't drive anyway, and I need to get home. O'Brien's pub. I knew the place, a dive bar downtown, nothing like the upscale restaurants Michael usually frequented. I'll be right there. The drive downtown took me 45 minutes in weekend traffic. When I pulled up outside O'Brien's, I could see Michael through the window, slumped over the bar with an empty glass in front of him. He stumbled out to my car, and I could immediately tell he'd had more than just a few drinks. His tie was loose, his hair was messed up, and he reeked of whiskey. Thanks, Dad, he mumbled, falling into the passenger seat. You're a lifesaver. What were you doing at O'Brien's? Meeting some guys from work. Talking about stuff. His words were slurred, and he was having trouble focusing his eyes. I started driving toward his house, taking the route carefully because of the weather. It had started snowing, and the roads were getting slick. Slow down, Dad. I'm going 35 in a 45 zone. Just slow down. The roads are bad. I slowed down to 30. We were crawling through downtown Chicago traffic, and other cars were passing us, but I wanted Michael to feel safe. That's when everything went wrong. We were stopped at a red light when the car behind us hit us. Not hard, just a little bump from someone who couldn't stop in time on the slick road. No damage that I could see, just a tiny jolt that barely moved us forward. But Michael exploded. What the fuck, Dad? What the fuck? Michael, calm down. It's just a fender bender. These things happen in the snow. A fender bender? A fender bender? Do you know what this car is worth? Do you know what my insurance rates are going to do if there's a claim? The light turned green, and I pulled forward, checking my mirrors. The car behind us was following, probably looking for a place to pull over and exchange information. We need to pull over and check for damage, I said. No, we're not pulling over. Just drive home. Drive me home right now. Son, we have to. Drive me home! His voice was so loud, so angry, that I flinched. I kept driving, but my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The car behind us followed us for about 10 blocks, probably trying to get our attention to pull over. But Michael kept shouting at me to keep driving, and eventually, they gave up and turned off. When we finally reached Michael's house, I was a nervous wreck. My hands were still shaking, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Michael, we need to go back. We need to exchange insurance information with. We need to do nothing. You need to learn how to fucking drive. He got out of the car and slammed the door so hard I thought the window might crack. But instead of going into his house, he walked around to my side of the car and knocked on my window. I rolled it down, thinking maybe he wanted to apologize, or talk about what had just happened. Instead, he leaned down and looked me right in the eyes. Get out of the car, Dad. What? Get out of the car. We need to talk. Something in his voice scared me, but I turned off the engine and stepped out into his driveway. The snow was coming down harder now, and the cold bit through my jacket immediately. Michael, what's this about? That's when he shoved me. Not hard, but hard enough to make me stumble backward against my car. I stared at him in shock. You embarrassed me tonight, he said, his voice low and dangerous. First you drive like an old man, then you let some idiot rear-end us, then you want to play Boy Scout and exchange insurance information like we're in some kind of driver's education course. Michael, I was being careful because you'd been drinking. I was trying to keep us safe. Safe? You want to know what's not safe? Having a father who drives like he's 90 years old and has no idea how the real world works. He shoved me again, harder this time. I stumbled and almost fell. Michael, stop. No, you stop. Stop embarrassing me. Stop acting like some doddering old fool every time we're together. Stop making me look bad in front of people who matter. The third shove sent me sprawling onto the cold pavement of his driveway. I landed hard on my back, the wind knocked out of me, snowflakes falling on my face as I looked up at my son. My son. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed everything for, standing over me like I was nothing more than trash he wanted to kick to the curb. Get up, he said. I struggled to my feet, my back aching from the fall. My jacket was torn at the elbow, and I could feel cold pavement grit embedded in my palm where I tried to catch myself. Michael! Don't. Just don't say anything. Get in your car and go home. I stood there for a moment, snow falling around us, staring at this stranger who shared my DNA but had none of my heart. I love you, son, I said quietly. He laughed, actually laughed. Love? You want to talk about love? You know what love is, Dad? Love is not embarrassing your children. Love is not being a burden. Love is knowing when you're not wanted and having the dignity to step aside. I got in my car with shaking hands and drove home through the snow, my body aching and my heart broken in ways I didn't think were possible. But the real humiliation was still coming. The humiliation that would push me over the edge and set in motion a chain of events that would destroy my son's life in a single morning. And it started with a phone call the very next day. I woke up the next morning with bruises on my back and a pain in my chest that had nothing to do with the fall. I barely slept, replaying the scene in Michael's driveway over and over in my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, cold, contemptuous, cruel. My son had put his hands on me. My son had knocked me to the ground and laughed when I told him I loved him. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, when the phone rang at 8:30 a.m. Dad? It was Michael's voice, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought maybe he was calling to apologize. Hello, Michael. Listen, I need to ask you a favor. Of course. Of course it wasn't an apology. What kind of favor? Sarah's parents are coming for lunch today. It's kind of a big deal. Her father is considering investing in a new venture I'm putting together, and I really need to make a good impression. I waited for him to continue, already knowing where this was going. The thing is, they're very traditional. Very formal. And they have certain expectations about family and presentation and that sort of thing. Michael, what are you asking me? There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice had that patient, condescending tone I'd come to hate. Dad, I think it would be better if you weren't around today. Just for lunch. Just while they're here. The words hit me like another shove. You don't want me to meet your wife's parents? It's not that I don't want you to meet them. It's just, Dad, after last night, I think we both need some space. And today isn't the right day for family complications. Family complications. That's what I was now. A complication. I wasn't planning to come over anyway, I said quietly. Good. Good, that's good. And Dad? Maybe you should think about, I don't know, getting yourself some schooling or something. Some classes. Social skills, maybe. Or driving lessons. Something to help you improve yourself. Get yourself some schooling. Like I was a child. Like I was some ignorant old man who didn't know how to function in the world. I have to go, Michael. I have things to do. Sure, Dad. And remember, stay home today. Sarah's parents are very important to our future. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there in my kitchen, holding the phone, feeling something inside me break completely. Not crack, not bend, break. Shatter into pieces that could never be put back together. My son was ashamed of me. He didn't want his in-laws to meet me because I might embarrass him. Because I might hurt his chances of getting their money. I was 63 years old. I'd raised 4 children mostly on my own. I'd worked multiple jobs for 30 years to give them everything I could. I'd sacrificed my dreams, my comfort, my happiness so they could have better lives. And now my oldest son, the one I was most proud of, the one who'd achieved everything I'd hoped for, thought I needed to get myself some schooling. I spent the morning walking around my house, looking at all the photos on the walls. Michael's high school graduation. His college graduation. His wedding day. Pictures of him holding Emma and Jake as babies. 20 years of proud father moments captured in silver frames. In every single photo, I was smiling. Beaming. Radiating pride and love and joy at my son's achievements. When had he stopped looking at me the same way? By noon, I'd made a decision. I was going to drive over to Michael's house. I was going to meet Sarah's parents, whether he wanted me to or not. I was going to remind him that I was his father, not some embarrassing stranger he could dismiss whenever convenient. I put on my best shirt, combed my hair, and got in my car. Michael's house was in full presentation mode when I arrived. The lawn was perfectly manicured despite the December weather. There were expensive cars in the driveway, Sarah's Mercedes, Michael's BMW, and a silver Lexus I didn't recognize that must have belonged to the parents. Through the front window, I could see them all gathered in the living room. Michael in his best suit, Sarah in an elegant dress, an older couple who looked like they'd stepped out of a country club magazine, and my grandchildren, Emma and Jake, dressed up like little adults. They looked like a perfect family. A complete family. A family with no room for an embarrassing old man who drove too slowly and didn't understand how the world worked. I almost turned around and went home. Almost. But then I remembered the sound of Michael's laughter when I told him I loved him. I remembered the contempt in his voice when he told me to get some schooling. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Sarah answered, and the color drained from her face when she saw me. Bob! What are you? Michael didn't say you were. Hello, Sarah. I thought I'd stop by and meet your parents. I could hear voices from the living room, Michael saying something about quarterly projections, a man's voice asking about market volatility. Normal, sophisticated, important conversation. Bob, maybe this isn't the best time, Sarah whispered. Michael said you weren't feeling well today. Weren't feeling well. That was the excuse he'd given for why his father wouldn't be joining them for lunch. I'm feeling fine, honey. Just fine. Before Sarah could stop me, I walked past her into the living room. The conversation stopped immediately. Michael looked up from his chair and his face went white, then red, then white again. Dad? What are you doing here? I came to meet Sarah's parents. I extended my hand to the older man, who stood up automatically out of politeness. Robert Kellerman. Michael's father. George Patterson, he said, shaking my hand with obvious confusion. Sarah's father. This is my wife, Linda. Pleasure to meet you both. There was an awkward silence. Emma and Jake ran over to hug me. Grandpa Bob. But I could see Michael's jaw clenching as he watched his carefully orchestrated afternoon falling apart. Dad, Michael said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Didn't we talk about this? About you staying home today? We talked about a lot of things, I said calmly. But I decided I wanted to meet George and Linda. George Patterson looked back and forth between us, clearly sensing tension but not understanding it. Michael, you didn't tell us your father was coming. He's not supposed to be here, Michael said, and immediately realized how terrible that sounded. I mean, he's been under the weather. I didn't want him to push himself. I'm perfectly healthy, I said. In fact, I was just thinking about taking some classes. Maybe learning some new skills. Michael thinks I need to get myself some schooling. The room went completely silent. George and Linda Patterson exchanged glances. Sarah's face went pale. Emma and Jake looked confused by the sudden tension. Michael's face was turning darker by the second. Dad, maybe we should step outside and talk. No, I think we should talk right here. In front of your important guests. Since you're so concerned about presentations and impressions. Bob, Sarah said nervously. Maybe you'd like some coffee? Or we could. I'd love some coffee, Sarah. Thank you. And I'd love to hear about this investment opportunity Michael's been working on. The one that's so important he had to make sure his father didn't embarrass him in front of you. George Patterson cleared his throat uncomfortably. Michael, perhaps we should reschedule this meeting for another time. No, Michael said sharply, his control finally snapping. No, we're not rescheduling anything. He stood up and pointed at me. Dad, you need to leave? Right now. Michael! Sarah gasped. No, Sarah. I'm done with this. I'm done with him showing up wherever he wants, whenever he wants, embarrassing me and disrupting my life. Michael's voice was getting louder, angrier. Dad, get out of my house. I stood my ground. This is how you talk to your father in front of guests? You're not my guest. You weren't invited. I specifically told you to stay away today, and you came anyway because you can't take a hint. Because you can't accept that sometimes you're not wanted. Linda Patterson was staring at Michael with horror. George was looking at the door like he wanted to escape. Emma started crying, and Jake ran to his mother. Michael, stop, Sarah pleaded. But Michael was beyond stopping. All the anger, all the contempt, all the resentment he'd been building up came pouring out. Do you want to know the truth, Dad? Do you really want to know? You embarrass me. You embarrass my family. You drive like an old man, you dress like you shop at garage sales, you live in that rundown house in that rundown neighborhood, and every time I'm seen with you, people wonder what the hell happened to me. The words hit me like physical blows. I could hear Emma crying harder, could see the shock on the Pattersons' faces, could feel my heart breaking all over again. Yesterday you drove so slowly and so badly that we got rear-ended, and then you wanted to play by the rules like some kind of Boy Scout instead of just handling it like an adult. And now today, after I specifically asked you to give me one day, to handle something important for my family's future, you show up anyway because you can't respect boundaries. Michael, please, Sarah whispered. No, Sarah! He needs to hear this. Dad, you need to understand something. Your time is over. Your way of doing things, your values, your whole approach to life, it doesn't work anymore. The world has moved on, and you haven't. I found my voice, quiet and steady despite the chaos around me. I raised you better than this. You raised me to be limited by your limitations. You raised me to think small and be satisfied with mediocrity. Well, I'm not satisfied with mediocrity. I want more than a little house and a blue-collar job and a simple life. I want success, and I want respect, and I want people to look at me and see someone who matters. And you can't have those things with me in your life? Michael looked me right in the eyes. Not the way you are now. Not as long as you keep showing up and reminding everyone where I came from. The silence that followed was deafening. George Patterson was staring at his hands. Linda was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Sarah was holding both children, who were crying and confused and scared. And I was standing in my son's living room, understanding for the first time that I had lost him completely. Not to success or money or ambition, but to shame. He was ashamed of me, and that shame had turned him into someone I didn't recognize. Okay, I said quietly. Okay, what? Okay. I understand. I'll go. I walked to the door, and Michael followed me. But just as I reached for the handle, he grabbed my arm. And Dad? Don't come back. Don't call, don't text, don't show up at family events. I need you to stay out of my life until you figure out how to be the kind of father I can be proud of. I looked at his hand on my arm, the same hand that had shoved me to the ground the night before. Then I looked up at his face, searching for any trace of the boy I'd raised, the young man who'd once promised me we'd make it work. There was nothing there but cold determination. I understand, I said again. I walked out of that house knowing I would never walk back into it as the same man. Something fundamental had changed in those few minutes. Something that would drive me to do things I never thought myself capable of. As I got in my car, I could hear voices from inside the house, Sarah apologizing to her parents, Michael trying to salvage his business opportunity, the children still crying. I drove home slowly, carefully, like the old man Michael said I was. And as I drove, a plan began forming in my mind. A plan that would teach my son exactly what kind of man his father really was. The next morning, Michael would go to his office like always. He would walk into his boss's room for their weekly Monday meeting, confident and arrogant and secure in his belief that he was better than the man who raised him. And when he walked into that room, he would turn as pale as chalk. Because I was going to remind him that sometimes, the people you underestimate are the most dangerous people of all. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a yellow legal pad and started writing down everything I knew about my son's life. His job, his boss, his coworkers, his ambitions, his fears, his weaknesses. Everything he'd ever told me during those brief periods when he still talked to me like I was his father instead of his burden. Michael worked at Hartwell and Associates as a senior financial advisor. His boss was a man named Richard Hartwell, the founder's son, a guy in his 50s who'd inherited the business and had been running it for about 15 years. Michael had mentioned him countless times, always with a mixture of respect and frustration. Hartwell's old school, Dad. He still believes in handshake deals and personal relationships. Sometimes I think he's stuck in the past. Stuck in the past? Interesting way to put it. I knew Michael made good money, but I also knew he lived beyond his means. The house in Winnetka, the private schools for the kids, the country club membership, Sarah's expensive tastes, it all cost more than even a successful financial advisor could comfortably afford. Michael had mentioned cash flow problems before, always in the context of needing bigger clients and better commissions. I also knew he was ambitious to the point of ruthlessness. He'd told me stories about colleagues he'd undermined, deals he'd stolen, clients he'd poached. He thought these stories made him sound smart and competitive. To me, they made him sound like someone who couldn't be trusted. But most importantly, I knew something Michael had forgotten in his rush to dismiss me as irrelevant. I wasn't always a retired factory worker living on Social Security. Before I started working at the plant, before Margaret and I had kids, before I settled into the simple life Michael was so ashamed of, I'd worked in finance myself. Not at his level, not with his fancy degree and connections, but I'd been a bookkeeper and junior accountant for 15 years at a small investment firm in downtown Chicago. I understood numbers. I understood how money moved, how deals were structured, how businesses operated. And I understood that successful men like Richard Hartwell got to where they were by being very, very careful about who they trusted. The next morning, I started making phone calls. Hartwell and Associates, how may I direct your call? Good morning. I'd like to speak with Mr. Richard Hartwell, please. May I ask who's calling? My name is Robert Kellerman. I'm calling about Michael Kellerman. One moment, please. The hold music played for nearly 5 minutes. When the receptionist came back, her voice was different, more formal, more cautious. Mr. Hartwell is in meetings all day. May I take a message? Please tell him that Robert Kellerman called about his son Michael, and that it's regarding some information he might find professionally relevant. I'll give him the message. Thank you. Oh, and please tell him I'll call back tomorrow if I don't hear from him today. I hung up and spent the rest of the morning thinking about what I was going to say when Richard Hartwell called me back. Because he would call back, I was sure of that. No business owner ignores a mysterious call about one of their employees, especially when the caller claims to have professionally relevant information. The call came at 2:30 that afternoon. Mr. Kellerman? This is Richard Hartwell. I got your message. His voice was exactly what I'd expected, confident, professional, but with an undertone of curiosity and wariness. Mr. Hartwell, thank you for calling me back. I know you're a busy man. My receptionist said you had information about Michael Kellerman. Michael is one of my senior advisors. Yes, sir. I know. Michael is my son. There was a pause. Your son? Yes, sir. And I'm calling because I believe there are some things about Michael that you should know. Things that could affect your business and your other employees. Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Kellerman, I'm not sure this is appropriate. Personnel matters. This isn't about personnel, Mr. Hartwell. This is about character. And integrity. And the kind of man you want representing your firm to your clients. I could hear him thinking, weighing the risks and benefits of this conversation. Finally, he said, What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that we meet in person. Somewhere private. Somewhere we can have a conversation about my son's professional conduct and personal ethics without interruption. Mr. Kellerman, if you have specific allegations. I have specific knowledge, Mr. Hartwell. Knowledge about how Michael treats people he considers beneath him. Knowledge about his attitude toward clients he thinks aren't worth his time. Knowledge about his approach to business relationships and personal loyalty. I let that sink in for a moment, then continued. I also have knowledge about some financial irregularities that Michael might not want his employer to know about. That was a lie, but it was a calculated lie. I was betting that Michael, with his expensive lifestyle and ambitious nature, had cut some corners that would worry a conservative business owner like Hartwell. Financial irregularities? Mr. Hartwell, I think we should meet. Are you free for coffee tomorrow morning? The meeting was set for 8 a.m. at a small cafe downtown, far from Hartwell and Associates and far from anywhere Michael might accidentally see us. I spent the evening preparing my materials, not documents or evidence, because I didn't have any, but talking points and strategies. I wasn't planning to lie about Michael, exactly. I was planning to tell the truth, just not the whole truth, and not in context. I was planning to let Richard Hartwell draw his own conclusions about what kind of employee he had working for him. And I was planning to make sure that the next time Michael walked into his boss's office, that arrogant confidence of his would crumble like paper in the rain. Richard Hartwell was younger than I'd expected, maybe 52, with gray at his temples and the kind of expensive suit that screamed old money and conservative values. He was already sitting at a corner table when I arrived, nursing a coffee and checking his phone. Mr. Kellerman? Call me Bob. Thank you for meeting with me. We shook hands, and I could feel him sizing me up, taking in my department store clothes, my working-class appearance, trying to figure out what kind of threat or opportunity one represented. Bob, I have to say, this is highly unusual. I don't typically meet with employees' family members. I understand that, sir. And I appreciate you making an exception. I sat down across from him and pulled out a small notebook, the same yellow legal pad I'd been writing on, but now looking official and important. Mr. Hartwell, how long has Michael been working for you? About 8 years. And in that time, have you ever had concerns about his interpersonal skills? Hartwell's eyebrows went up slightly. What do you mean? I mean his ability to relate to people from different backgrounds, different social classes, people he might consider beneath his station. Bob, I'm not sure where you're going with this. I leaned forward slightly. Mr. Hartwell, my son is ashamed of me. He's ashamed of where he comes from, ashamed of his background, ashamed of the family that raised him. And that shame has turned him into someone who treats people with contempt if they don't meet his standards for success and sophistication. Hartwell was listening now, really listening. Yesterday, he told me to my face that I embarrass him. That my way of doing things doesn't work anymore. That the world has moved on and I haven't. He told me not to come back into his life until I figure out how to be the kind of father he can be proud of. That's unfortunate. But I'm not sure what this has to do with his work. It has everything to do with his work, Mr. Hartwell. Because if Michael treats his own father with that kind of disrespect and contempt, how do you think he treats clients who don't have enough money or social status to meet his standards? I could see the thought taking root in Hartwell's mind. He was a businessman, and businessmen understand that how someone treats their family often predicts how they'll treat their customers. Have you ever gotten complaints about Michael's attitude toward clients? Hartwell hesitated. There have been occasional concerns. What kind of concerns? Nothing serious. Just some feedback that he can be impatient with clients who need more hand-holding. Less experienced investors, older clients who ask a lot of questions. Perfect. Exactly what I'd hoped to hear. Mr. Hartwell, Michael told me last week that he lost a major account, the Morrison account, I think, because of traffic and bad luck. But I was there. I saw how he behaved under pressure, and I can tell you that Morrison didn't go with another firm because of traffic delays. Another lie, but a plausible one. Morrison went with another firm because Michael showed them who he really is when things don't go his way. Demanding, disrespectful, entitled. The kind of man who blames other people for his problems and expects the world to bend to his schedule. I opened my notebook and pretended to read from it. Mr. Hartwell, I've been keeping track of some things Michael has told me about his work. Comments he's made about clients, strategies he's used, approaches he's taken. I think you might find some of these concerning. What followed was 20 minutes of carefully selected truth. Every arrogant comment Michael had ever made about clients who weren't wealthy enough or sophisticated enough for his tastes. Every story he told about cutting corners or bending rules to close deals faster. Every example of the contempt and entitlement that had been growing in him for years. I didn't lie about any of it. I just presented it in a context that made Michael sound like a liability waiting to happen. By the time I finished, Richard Hartwell looked genuinely troubled. Bob, this is very concerning information. Mr. Hartwell, I'm not asking you to fire my son. I'm not asking you to punish him. I'm just asking you to be aware of who he really is, and to watch for patterns that might affect your business. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. There's one more thing. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A printout from the county clerk's office showing the traffic citation I'd received for driving on the shoulder. 3 weeks ago, Michael pressured me to break the law to help him get to a client meeting on time. When we got pulled over, he blamed me for the ticket and the lost account. He told me that my mistakes had cost him $15 million in commission. I handed Hartwell the citation. This is the ticket I got. $450 for illegal use of the shoulder. Michael asked me to drive illegally, and when it backfired, he threw me under the bus to protect himself. Hartwell studied the ticket, his face growing darker. The thing is, Mr. Hartwell, a man who would ask his own father to break the law for his convenience, and then blame that father when it doesn't work out, what would that same man ask his clients to do? What rules might he ask them to bend? What laws might he suggest they ignore if it means bigger profits? I could see Hartwell's mind working, connecting dots, imagining worst-case scenarios involving regulatory investigations and client lawsuits and professional sanctions. "Bob, I want to thank you for this information. This is exactly the kind of thing I need to know about my employees. I hope you'll handle it discreetly, sir. Like I said, Michael is still my son, despite everything." "Of course. And Bob? I'm sorry about what's happened between you and Michael. No father should have to deal with that kind of disrespect." We shook hands, and I walked out of that cafe knowing that I'd just changed my son's life forever. In about 24 hours, Michael would walk into his weekly Monday meeting with Richard Hartwell, expecting another routine discussion about clients and quarterly projections. Instead, he was going to get the shock of his life. And I was going to get my revenge. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of bitter December wind that cuts right through your coat. I woke up early, 5 a.m., even though I had nothing scheduled, nothing planned except waiting. Waiting for my phone to ring. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring out the window at the bare trees in my backyard. Margaret had planted those trees when the kids were young. Michael used to climb the oak tree every summer, scrambling up to the highest branch he could reach, calling down to me to watch his latest trick. "Look, Dad! Look what I can do!" Always wanting my attention, my approval, my pride. When had that stopped? When had my attention become unwanted, my approval irrelevant, my pride an embarrassment? I checked the clock, 6:15 a.m. Michael would be getting ready for work now, picking out one of his expensive suits, checking his calendar for the day's appointments. He had no idea what was waiting for him. At 7:30, I drove to a coffee shop about 3 blocks from Hartwell and Associates. Not because I had any business there, but because I wanted to be close. I wanted to be nearby when my son's world fell apart. I ordered a black coffee and found a seat by the window where I could see the Hartwell building in the distance, a gleaming glass tower that housed Michael's dreams and ambitions and carefully constructed professional identity. At exactly 9 a.m., my phone rang. "Dad?" Michael's voice was shaky, confused, panicked in a way I'd never heard before. "Hello, Michael." "Dad, what did you do?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "What do you mean, son? Don't play dumb with me. Hartwell just called me into his office. He knows things, Dad. He knows things about me that only you would know." "What kind of things?" "Things I've said. Things I've done. Private conversations we've had." "Dad, what the hell did you tell him?" "I told him the truth, Michael." There was silence on the line. I could almost hear my son's mind racing, trying to process what had happened, trying to figure out how his father, the embarrassing old man he dismissed so easily, had managed to reach into his professional life and turn it upside down. "The truth about what?" "The truth about who you are. The truth about how you treat people. The truth about the kind of man you've become. You son of a bitch." "Careful, Michael. Remember who you're talking to. I'm talking to the man who just destroyed my career. Dad, do you have any idea what you've done?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking at the Hartwell building where my son was probably pacing in his office, his carefully controlled world crumbling around him. "I have a very good idea of what I've done. I've given your boss some information he needed about one of his employees. Information about character and judgment and professional ethics." "What information? What exactly did you tell him?" "I told him about the Morrison account and how you pressured me to break the law to get you there on time. I told him about your attitude toward clients who don't meet your standards for wealth and sophistication. I told him about how you treat people you consider beneath you. Those were private conversations. Those were insights into your character, Michael. And character matters in business, especially in finance where people trust you with their life savings." I could hear voices in the background, someone talking to Michael, probably calling him into another meeting. "Dad, you need to call him back. You need to tell him you made a mistake, that you were angry and said things you didn't mean." "But I wasn't angry when I talked to him, Michael. I was calm and rational and honest. I told him exactly what kind of man my son has become. I have to go. Hartwell wants to see me again. But this isn't over, Dad. This isn't fucking over. He hung up, and I sat back down with my coffee, feeling something I hadn't felt in months: satisfaction. The second call came 2 hours later. Dad? Michael's voice was different now, smaller, defeated, scared. How did it go with your boss? You know how it went. You know exactly how it went because you planned it. I waited. I'm on probation, Dad. 6 months of probation, with mandatory counseling about professional conduct and client relations. One more complaint, one more incident, and I'm fired. That seems fair. Fair? Fair? Dad, this is my career. This is my family's livelihood. This is everything I've worked for. And now you know how it feels to have everything you've worked for threatened by someone else's actions. What's that supposed to mean? It means that for 35 years, I worked for everything you've achieved. I sacrificed my dreams, my comfort, my happiness to give you opportunities one never had. And last week, you threw it all back in my face and told me to get some schooling. There was a long silence. Dad, I'm sorry. Okay? I'm sorry about what I said. I'm sorry about how I treated you. Can we fix this? How do you propose we fix it, Michael? You call Hartwell back. You tell him you were wrong about me, that you were just angry and wanted to cause trouble. You tell him I'm a good employee and that he should give me another chance. And why would I do that? Because I'm your son. Because you love me. I thought about that for a long moment. Did I love him? After everything he'd done, everything he'd said, did I still love the man who knocked me to the ground in his driveway and laughed when I told him I loved him? Michael, do you remember what you said to me in your living room yesterday? In front of your wife's parents? I was upset. I was under pressure. You said that your time is over. That my way of doing things doesn't work anymore. That the world has moved on and I haven't. Dad, you said that I embarrass you and that you can't be successful with me in your life. You said I needed to stay out of your life until I figured out how to be the kind of father you could be proud of. I didn't mean. You meant every word, Michael. And now you're finding out that maybe the world hasn't moved on as much as you thought. Maybe my way of doing things still works just fine when it comes to consequences and accountability. I could hear him breathing hard, trying to control his panic. What do you want, Dad? Tell me what you want, and I'll do it. What did I want? Revenge? I'd already gotten that. An apology? Words were cheap, especially from someone who'd already proven they couldn't be trusted. What I wanted was for my son to understand that respect isn't something you earn through success or money or status. Respect is something you give to people because they're human beings worthy of dignity, regardless of their age or social class or usefulness to your ambitions. But I didn't think Michael was capable of understanding that yet. Maybe he never would be. I want you to think about something, Michael. I want you to think about the fact that the embarrassing old man you wanted out of your life just walked into your boss's office and convinced him to put you on probation with a few phone calls and 1 cup of coffee. Dad, I want you to think about what that says about my intelligence, my understanding of how the world works, and my ability to affect your life when you underestimate me. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. See, Michael, you forgot something important. You forgot that before I was the embarrassing factory worker you're ashamed of, I was a man with skills and knowledge and connections. You forgot that I understand business and finance and how to read people and situations. I never forgot. You forgot that the reason I ended up in a simple job with a simple life wasn't because I was incapable of more, but because I chose to prioritize my family over my career. I chose to be the kind of father who was present for his children instead of the kind who was too busy climbing the ladder to come home for dinner. The truth of that hit both of us at the same time. Dad, You what, Michael? I don't know. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. Just think. Think about what kind of man you want to be, and what kind of father you want your children to remember. I hung up and finished my coffee, watching the people walking by on the street below. Young professionals in expensive suits, hurrying to important meetings, carrying briefcases full of deals and ambitions and dreams. They all reminded me of Michael, so focused on success that they'd forgotten what success was supposed to be for. My phone rang again 20 minutes later, but I didn't answer it. It rang 4 more times over the next hour, and I ignored each call. I had said what I needed to say. Now it was up to Michael to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. But as I drove home that afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. I'd hurt my son professionally and personally, and while part of me felt justified, another part of me wondered if I'd gone too far. Revenge, I was learning, is a dish that tastes different than you expect. Even when it's perfectly cooked and thoroughly deserved, it leaves you feeling empty in ways you don't anticipate. The real question was, what would Michael do next? For 3 days, Michael didn't call. For 3 days, I heard nothing from him, nothing from Sarah, nothing about how my conversation with Richard Hartwell was affecting their lives. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself that Michael had brought this on himself, that he'd earned every consequence coming his way. But late at night, lying in the bed I'd shared with Margaret for 23 years, I found myself staring at the ceiling and wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The call that broke the silence didn't come from Michael. It came from Jennifer. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" Jennifer was my second child, 33 years old, a high school teacher with 2 kids of her own and a moral compass that had never wavered even when life got complicated. If Jennifer was calling me with that tone of voice, I was in real trouble. "What do you mean? Don't play dumb with me, Dad." Sarah called me crying. "She says Michael's been put on probation at work because of something you told his boss. She says you're trying to destroy their family." I closed my eyes. "Did Sarah tell you what led up to this?" "She told me you had some kind of fight, and that you went behind Michael's back to his employer." "Dad, that's really low. Even for someone as stubborn as you." "Jennifer, your brother put his hands on me." "What?" "He shoved me to the ground in his driveway. He told me I was an embarrassment to his family. He told me not to come back into his life until I figured out how to be a father he could be proud of." There was silence on the line. Then, quietly, "He shoved you?" 3 times. The last time hard enough to knock me down on the pavement." "Dad, why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because he's your brother, and I didn't want to put you in the middle of our problems." Another silence. When Jennifer spoke again, her voice was different, softer, more concerned. "Dad, are you okay? Are you hurt?" "My back's still sore, but I'm fine. Physically, anyway." "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Sarah made it sound like you just went crazy and decided to sabotage Michael's career for no reason. Maybe that's how Michael told it to her. Maybe he left out the part where he assaulted his 63-year-old father because he was embarrassed about getting a traffic ticket." Jennifer sighed heavily. "This family is so fucked up. Language, honey. Dad, I'm 33 years old. I can say fucked up if I want to. And this situation definitely qualifies." Despite everything, I found myself smiling. Jennifer had always been the most direct of my children, the one who called things what they were instead of dancing around uncomfortable truths. "What exactly did you tell his boss?" I gave Jennifer the same rundown I'd given Richard Hartwell: Michael's attitude toward clients, his willingness to pressure people into breaking rules, his contempt for people he considered beneath his station. "All of that is true?" she asked when I finished. "Every word. I didn't make up anything, Jennifer. I just presented information that his employer needed to have." "Dad, I get why you're angry. I really do. But going to someone's job, that's their livelihood. That's their family's security. And what about my security? What about my dignity? What about the fact that I'm his father, and he treated me like garbage?" "You're right. You're absolutely right. But Dad, 2 wrongs don't make a right. You taught me that when I was 8 years old." She was right, of course. I had taught her that. I'd taught all my children that revenge wasn't the answer, that taking the high road was always better than sinking to someone else's level. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your heart when you're the one who's been wronged are 2 very different things. "What would you have done, Jennifer?" If one of your kids treated you the way Michael treated me, what would you have done? I don't know, Dad. I honestly don't know. But I wouldn't have gone to their job. I would have done something that focused on fixing our relationship, not destroying their career. And what if they didn't want to fix the relationship? What if they told you to stay out of their life until you became someone they could be proud of? Jennifer was quiet for a long time. I guess I would have let them go, she said finally. I would have been heartbroken, but I would have let them go and hoped that someday they'd realize what they'd lost. Maybe you're stronger than I am. Or maybe I'm less proud. Dad, I think you need to fix this. I think you need to call Michael's boss and tell him you made a mistake. I didn't make a mistake, Jennifer. Everything I told Richard Hartwell was true. Maybe it was true, but it was also cruel. And you raised me to be better than cruel, even when someone deserves it. After I hung up with Jennifer, I sat in my kitchen for hours, thinking about what she'd said. Thinking about the kind of man I wanted to be, and the kind of father I wanted to be remembered as. The problem was, I couldn't untangle my anger from my hurt, and I couldn't untangle my hurt from my love. Michael had broken something in me that might never heal properly, and the scar tissue was still too tender to forgive. The knock on my door came at 8 p.m. on Friday night. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I rarely got visitors after dark. When I looked through the peephole, I saw Sarah standing on my porch, alone, with tears streaming down her face. I opened the door immediately. Sarah? What's wrong? Are the kids okay? The kids are fine, Bob. They're with my parents. Can I come in? Of course, honey. Of course. I led her to my living room and got her a glass of water. She sat on my couch, the same couch where Michael used to do his homework as a teenager, and tried to compose herself. Bob, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. What's happened? Michael's falling apart. Ever since Monday, ever since his meeting with Mr. Hartwell, he's been. I've never seen him like this. He's not sleeping, he's barely eating, he's snapping at the kids, and he won't tell me what exactly happened in that meeting. She looked up at me with eyes that reminded me so much of Margaret's when she was worried about one of the children. Bob, I know Michael has been difficult lately. I know he hasn't treated you the way he should. But he's still my husband, and he's still the father of my children, and I'm watching him destroy himself over this. Sarah, did he tell you what he did to me? He told me you had a fight. He told me you were angry about some business deal that went wrong. Is that all he told you? She hesitated. What else should he have told me? I sat down across from her and, as gently as I could, told her everything. The traffic stop, the lost Morrison account, the night he'd been drinking and demanded I pick him up. The shoving, the fall, the humiliation in front of her parents. With each detail, Sarah's face grew paler. He pushed you? He actually put his hands on you. 3 times. The last time hard enough to knock me down. Oh my God! Bob, I had no idea. He made it sound like you were just being vindictive over nothing. I was being vindictive, I said. But not over nothing. Sarah put her head in her hands. This is all my fault. How is this your fault? Because I knew he was changing. I've watched it happen over the past few years. The way he talks about people, the way he treats service workers, the way he's become so focused on image and status. I should have said something. I should have stopped it before it got this bad. Sarah, you can't control another person's choices. But I enabled them. Every time he made a snide comment about someone's clothes or car or house, I just stayed quiet. Every time he acted like he was better than other people, I just went along with it because it was easier than fighting. She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. Bob, my children watched their father disrespect their grandfather. Emma asked me why Daddy was so mean to Grandpa Bob, and I didn't know what to tell her. That hit me harder than anything else she could have said. My grandchildren had witnessed their father's cruelty. They'd seen him knock me down and treat me like garbage. What did you tell her? I told her that sometimes grown-ups have arguments, and that Daddy was just upset about work. But she's 7 years old, Bob. She knows the difference between an argument and being mean. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, Sarah spoke again. Bob, I'm not asking you to apologize for defending yourself. I'm not even asking you to forgive Michael, because I'm not sure I can forgive him right now either. But I'm asking you to think about the kids. Emma and Jake love you so much, and they don't understand why Grandpa Bob isn't coming around anymore. Michael told me to stay out of his life. Michael says a lot of things when he's angry. But the kids didn't tell you to stay away. And deep down, underneath all his pride and stubbornness, Michael doesn't want you to stay away either. How can you be sure of that? Because he talks about you. Even when he's angry, even when he's complaining about something you've done, he talks about you. He tells stories about when he was growing up, about things you taught him, about memories you made together. Bob, you're still the most important man in his life, and losing you is killing him. I wanted to believe that. God, how I wanted to believe that somewhere underneath the arrogant, cruel stranger my son had become, there was still the boy who used to climb my oak tree and call for me to watch his tricks. Sarah, what exactly do you want me to do? I want you to call Mr. Hartwell. I want you to tell him that you were angry and that maybe you presented Michael in an unfairly negative light. I want you to ask him to give Michael another chance. And what about Michael? What does he want? Michael is too proud to ask for your help. But Bob, if you don't do something, I'm afraid he's going to lose his job entirely. And if he loses his job... She didn't finish the sentence, but I could fill in the blanks. If Michael lost his job, they'd lose the house, the kids would have to change schools, their entire carefully constructed life would collapse. Has he apologized to you? I asked. For what he did to me? Sarah's silence was answer enough. Sarah, I appreciate you coming here. I really do. And I understand why you're worried about Michael and the kids. But I can't just pretend that what he did is okay. I can't just sweep it under the rug and go back to being the embarrassing father he tolerates when convenient. I'm not asking you to pretend it's okay. I'm asking you to be the bigger person. I'm asking you to save my family. The weight of that request settled on my shoulders like a heavy coat. Sarah was asking me to sacrifice my own dignity and sense of justice to protect the man who had knocked me down and laughed at my love. But she was also asking me to protect my grandchildren. And despite everything Michael had done, I still loved Emma and Jake with every fiber of my being. If I do this, I said slowly, if I call Richard Hartwell and try to undo what I've done, what guarantee do I have that Michael won't treat me the same way again as soon as this crisis passes? You don't have any guarantees, Sarah said honestly. But Bob, if you don't do this, you'll never have the chance to find out if Michael can change. After Sarah left, I poured myself a glass of the whiskey I kept for special occasions and sat in my living room, looking at the photos on my mantelpiece. Pictures of Michael as a baby, as a toddler, as a teenager graduating from high school. Pictures of him holding Emma and Jake when they were born. In every single photo, he was smiling. Happy, proud, full of love and potential and hope for the future. When had that boy disappeared? When had love turned to shame, respect turned to contempt, gratitude turned to entitlement? And more importantly, was there any way to get him back? I thought about Margaret, about what she would have done in this situation. She'd always been the peacemaker in our family, the one who found ways to heal rifts and rebuild bridges. She'd never let pride stand in the way of love, never let anger overshadow the bigger picture. What would you do, sweetheart? I said aloud to her picture on the mantel. If you were here, what would you tell me to do? But Margaret wasn't there, and I was left to make this choice on my own. A choice between justice and mercy, between standing my ground and saving my family. A choice that would determine not just Michael's future, but the future of my relationship with my grandchildren and the kind of man I wanted to be in the final chapters of my life. The phone sat on the table beside me, Richard Hartwell's business card next to it. One phone call could fix everything. Or destroy what was left of my self-respect forever. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's tear-stained face. Every time I started to drift off, I heard Emma's voice asking why Daddy was so mean to Grandpa Bob. By 6 a.m., I was sitting at my kitchen table with my fourth cup of coffee, staring at Richard Hartwell's business card and trying to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. The rational part of my mind, the part that still burned with humiliation and anger, said that Michael had earned every consequence coming his way. He'd made his choices, and now he could live with the results. Justice demanded that he face the full weight of his actions without his embarrassing father swooping in to save him. But the father part of my mind, the part that remembered teaching him to ride a bike and helping him with algebra homework and holding him when he cried after Margaret died, that part couldn't stop thinking about Emma and Jake, and what would happen to them if their father lost everything. At 8:30 a.m., I called Hartwell and Associates. Mr. Hartwell's office, this is Linda. Good morning, Linda. This is Robert Kellerman. I met with Mr. Hartwell earlier this week about my son, Michael. Oh yes, Mr. Kellerman. Mr. Hartwell mentioned your conversation. How can I help you? I'd like to schedule another meeting with Mr. Hartwell if possible. I have some additional information to share with him. Let me check his calendar. Would this afternoon work? He has an opening at 2 p.m. That would be perfect. The hours between that phone call and 2 p.m. felt like the longest of my life. I changed clothes 3 times, rehearsed what I was going to say dozens of different ways, and second-guessed myself with every breath. But by the time I walked into Richard Hartwell's office that afternoon, I knew what I had to do. Bob, good to see you again. Please sit down. Hartwell looked more relaxed than he had during our first meeting, more confident, like a man who'd successfully handled a potential problem and was proud of his decisive action. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Mr. Hartwell. Of course. Linda said you had additional information about Michael? I do, but it's not the kind of information you might expect. I pulled out the same yellow legal pad I'd brought to our first meeting, but this time it contained different notes. Notes about the Michael that Hartwell hadn't heard about yet. Mr. Hartwell, when we talked earlier this week, I told you about my son's flaws and mistakes. I told you about his arrogance and his poor judgment and his attitude toward people he considers beneath him. Everything I said was true. Hartwell nodded. And I appreciate your honesty. It's helped me understand some patterns I'd been noticing in Michael's work. But I didn't tell you the whole truth, Mr. Hartwell. I didn't tell you about the other side of my son, because at the time, I was too angry to remember it myself. I opened my notebook and pretended to read from it, though I had the words memorized. Michael has been with your firm for 8 years. In that time, has he ever missed a deadline? No, not that I can recall. Has he ever failed to meet his quarterly targets? No, Michael's been one of our most consistent performers. Has he ever been involved in any ethical violations or regulatory problems? No, nothing like that. Mr. Hartwell, I want to tell you about some things Michael has done that I didn't mention in our first conversation. Things that might give you a more complete picture of who he really is. What followed was 30 minutes of the other truth about my son. The truth I'd been too hurt and angry to share the first time around. I told Hartwell about the Christmas when Michael was 16. When he spent his entire savings from his part-time job to buy gifts for a family at his school whose father had been laid off. I told him about the time he volunteered at a homeless shelter every weekend for 2 years in college, not because he needed community service hours, but because he genuinely wanted to help. I told him about the night Margaret died, when 13-year-old Michael held the family together while I fell apart. About how he helped his younger siblings with homework and made sure they ate dinner and got to school on time during those terrible months when I could barely function. I told him about the client Michael had mentioned once, an elderly woman who'd been widowed and needed someone to help her understand her husband's investments. According to Michael, she wasn't wealthy enough to be a priority client, but he'd spend hours with her anyway, patiently explaining every detail until she felt confident managing her own finances. He never billed her for those extra hours, I said. He told me that some things were more important than money. Hartwell was listening intently now, his earlier confidence replaced by thoughtful consideration. Mr. Hartwell, my son has become someone I don't always recognize, Success has changed him in ways that worry me. But underneath the arrogance and the poor judgment, he's still the young man who sacrificed his own childhood to help raise his siblings. He's still the person who cares more about other people than he lets on. Bob, I appreciate this additional context, but it doesn't change the concerns you raised about his professional conduct. You're absolutely right. It doesn't change those concerns, and it shouldn't. But I hope it gives you a more complete picture of the man you're dealing with. I closed my notebook and looked directly at Hartwell. Mr. Hartwell, I want to be completely honest with you about why I came to see you the first time. I wasn't just concerned about your business or your other employees. I was hurt and angry, and I wanted to hurt Michael the way he'd hurt me. Hartwell's eyebrows went up. I see. That doesn't make the information I gave you untrue. But it does make my motivations questionable. I use your business as a weapon in a family dispute, and that wasn't fair to you or to Michael. What exactly are you saying, Bob? I'm saying that if you decide Michael deserves another chance, a real chance, not just probation, you might find that the man I described to you this afternoon is more representative of who he really is than the man I described last week. Hartwell leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. Bob, are you asking me to reverse my decision about Michael's probation? I'm asking you to consider all the information you now have, and make whatever decision you think is best for your business. If that means keeping him on probation, then that's what it means. If it means giving him another chance, then I hope he'll prove worthy of it. And if I do give him another chance, what assurance do I have that these attitude problems won't resurface? You don't have any assurance, Mr. Hartwell. Just like I don't have any assurance that sharing this information with you will make any difference in how Michael treats his family. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith and hope that people are capable of learning from their mistakes. We sat in silence for several minutes while Hartwell processed everything I'd told him. Bob, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why are you doing this? After everything Michael put you through, after the way he treated you, why are you here trying to save his job? I thought about Sarah's tears, about Emma's confusion, about Jake's innocent face. I thought about the boy who used to climb my oak tree, and the man he could still become if someone gave him the chance. Because he's my son, Mr. Hartwell. And despite everything that's happened between us, despite all the ways he's disappointed me, I still believe he's capable of being better than he's been lately. That's very generous of you. It's not generous. It's just love. Sometimes love means holding people accountable for their mistakes. And sometimes it means giving them the opportunity to learn from those mistakes and do better. Hartwell nodded slowly. I need some time to think about this, Bob. This changes things, but I'm not sure yet how much it changes them. I understand. Take all the time you need. As I stood to leave, Hartwell called after me. Bob? For what it's worth, Michael is lucky to have a father like you. Not many parents would do what you've done, either time. I drove home that afternoon feeling empty in a way I couldn't explain. I'd done the right thing, I was sure of that. But doing the right thing and feeling good about it weren't always the same thing. I'd swallowed my pride, sacrificed my sense of justice, and potentially undermined the only consequence Michael might face for his actions. All for the possibility, not the guarantee, just the possibility, that he might learn something from this experience and become a better man. The call came 3 days later, while I was working in my garden, pulling up the dead plants from Margaret's flower bed and preparing the soil for winter. Dad? Michael's voice was different than it had been during our previous conversations, quieter, more uncertain. Hello, Michael. Dad, Hartwell called me into his office today. He told me about your second meeting with him. I waited. He's taking me off probation. He's giving me another chance, with the understanding that there won't be a third chance. That's good news, son. Dad, why did you do that? After everything I said to you, after the way I treated you, why did you go back and try to fix things for me? It was the first time in months that Michael had asked me a question that sounded genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Because you're my son, Michael. And because I believe you're capable of being better than you've been. There was a long silence on the line. Dad, I owe you an apology. I owe you a lot of apologies, actually. Yes, you do. I've been acting like someone I don't recognize. Someone I don't like very much. And I took out all my frustration and disappointment on the person who least deserved it. Michael, I need you to understand something. What I did with your boss, both times, that can never happen again. I will never again insert myself into your professional life, no matter what happens between us personally. But by the same token, you can never again treat me the way you treated me these past few months. I know, Dad. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you did to me? Do you understand what it felt like to have my own son knock me to the ground and tell me I was an embarrassment to his family? When Michael spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry for everything. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how I became that person, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to get help, and I'm going to do better. Michael, I need you to promise me something. Anything, Dad. Anything. I need you to promise me that Emma and Jake will never again see their father treat their grandfather with disrespect. Whatever problems you and I have, whatever mistakes either of us makes, your children should never have to witness their family falling apart. I promise, Dad. I swear to you, that will never happen again. And Michael? The next time you're ashamed of me, and there probably will be a next time, because I'm not going to change who I am to meet your expectations, I need you to keep it to yourself. I need you to remember that I'm your father, not your burden. Dad, I'm not ashamed of you. I was never really ashamed of you. Then what was it, Michael? What was all of this really about? Another long silence. When he finally answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. I was ashamed of myself. I was ashamed that with all my education and success and money, I still felt like that scared 13-year-old kid who didn't know how to take care of his family after Mom died. And instead of dealing with that shame, I projected it onto you. For the first time in months, I heard my son in that voice. Not the arrogant stranger he'd become, but the boy I'd raised and loved and been proud of. Michael, you were 13 years old. You weren't supposed to know how to take care of a family. That was my job. But I felt like I was failing everyone, including you. And when I finally got successful enough to take care of everyone, to give you and the kids everything I thought you deserved, it still didn't feel like enough. It still felt like I was that scared kid playing at being an adult. Son, you didn't fail anyone. You stepped up when your family needed you, and you've spent the last 20 years building a life that would make your mother proud. Then why doesn't it feel like enough? Because success without character isn't really success, Michael. An accomplishment without compassion isn't really accomplishment. You forgot that somewhere along the way, but forgetting isn't the same as not knowing. We talked for another hour, really talked for the first time in years. About Margaret, about the kids, about the pressures of success and the fear of failure, and the weight of responsibility that never gets lighter, just more familiar. When we finally hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Hope that my son could find his way back to the person he used to be. Hope that our family could heal from the damage we'd done to each other. Hope that Emma and Jake would grow up with memories of a grandfather who loved them and a father who respected that love. But as I sat in my kitchen that evening, looking at the photos on my mantelpiece, I knew that this was just the beginning. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Respect, once lost, takes consistent action to regain. The real test wouldn't be Michael's apologies or promises. The real test would be what he did next, how he treated me the next time we disagreed, how he handled the next crisis that tested his character. I'd given him a second chance, maybe an undeserved one. Now it was up to him to prove that my faith in him wasn't misplaced. 6 months have passed since that conversation with Michael, and I'm sitting here now, 3 years after the night he knocked me down in his driveway, trying to make sense of everything that's happened since then. The changes didn't come all at once. They came slowly, tentatively, like trust being rebuilt one small gesture at a time. The first sign came 2 weeks after our phone call, when Michael showed up at my door on a Saturday morning, not calling first, not asking permission, just appearing on my porch with a toolbox in his hand and determination in his eyes. "Dad, your front step is wobbling. I thought I'd fix it for you." It was such a simple thing, such a normal father-son interaction, but it felt like a miracle. I watched him work for 2 hours, replacing the loose boards and reinforcing the supports, and we talked about nothing important: the weather, the Cubs' chances this season, whether the city would ever fix the pothole at the end of my street. But underneath the ordinary conversation, something extraordinary was happening. My son was choosing to spend his valuable time helping his embarrassing old father with a home repair project that nobody else would ever notice. "There," he said, testing the step with his weight. "That should hold for another 20 years. "Thank you, son. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did, Dad. I had to do exactly this." The second sign came a month later, when Michael called me on a Wednesday evening, not because he needed something, not because there was a crisis, but just because he wanted to talk. "Dad, Emma got the lead in her school play. She's going to be Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz." "That's wonderful. She must be so excited." "She is." "And Dad?" "She specifically asked if Grandpa Bob would be coming to watch her perform. I told her that of course you would be, if you wanted to. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The play is next Friday at 7 p.m. I know it's a school night and kind of late, but Michael, I'll be there." And I was there, sitting in the third row of the elementary school auditorium, watching my 7-year-old granddaughter sing "Over the Rainbow," with a voice like an angel and a smile that lit up the entire room. After the play, Michael found me in the crowd of parents and grandparents. "Dad, we're all going out for ice cream to celebrate. Would you like to join us?" "I don't want to impose." "You wouldn't be imposing. We want you there. We want you there." For words that meant more to me than Michael could possibly know. At the ice cream shop, I watched my son with his children, patient with Jake when he couldn't decide between chocolate and vanilla, proud of Emma as she recounted every moment of her performance, present in a way that I remembered from when he was young. And I watched him with Sarah's parents, who had also come to the play. George and Linda Patterson, the same couple who'd witnessed Michael's cruelest behavior toward me 6 months earlier, were clearly seeing a different version of their son-in-law. "Bob," George said to me as we waited in line for our orders, "Michael tells me you used to work in finance before you went to the plant." "A long time ago, yes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this market volatility we've been seeing lately. Michael says you have some interesting insights." "Michael says?" My son had been talking about me to his father-in-law, not with shame or embarrassment, but with something that sounded almost like respect. The third sign came 2 months later, when I got a call from Richard Hartwell himself. "Bob, I hope you don't mind me calling you directly." "Not at all, Mr. Hartwell. Is everything all right with Michael?" "Everything is more than all right. Bob, I wanted you to know that Michael just landed the biggest account in our firm's history. A pension fund management deal worth over $200 million. That's incredible news. But that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because of what Michael did after he closed the deal. He came into my office and asked me to donate 10% of his commission to a financial literacy program for low-income seniors." I felt my throat tighten. "He did?" "He said his father had taught him that success without service was just selfishness. He said he wanted to honor the man who raised him by using his good fortune to help people who reminded him of where he came from." After I hung up with Hartwell, I sat in my kitchen and cried for 20 minutes. Not tears of sadness or anger or frustration, but tears of pride and relief and overwhelming love for the man my son was becoming again. But the moment that convinced me Michael had truly changed came 6 weeks ago, on a rainy Thursday evening when I was driving home from grocery shopping. I was stopped at a red light when I saw them, a young couple with a small child, standing at a bus stop in the rain. Their car had apparently broken down. I could see it pulled over with its hazard lights blinking, and they were soaked and obviously distressed. Without thinking about it, I pulled over and rolled down my window. "Do you folks need help?" The man looked suspicious at first. You can't blame people for being careful these days. But when he saw my gray hair and gentle expression, his face relaxed. Our car died, and we're trying to get to the hospital. My wife has an appointment, and we don't have money for a cab. Get in. I'll take you. As they climbed into my car, the man in front, his wife and baby in the back, I couldn't help but think about all the times Michael had criticized my willingness to help strangers, my habit of stopping for people who needed assistance. You can't save everyone, Dad. And you don't know who these people really are. But as I drove this young family to the hospital, listening to them thank me over and over again, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, proud of who I was, regardless of what anyone else thought about my choices. When I dropped them off at the hospital entrance, the man tried to give me $20. Sir, I can't pay you much, but keep your money, I told him. Just help someone else when you can. As I drove home that night, I realized that Michael's shame about me had never really been about my clothes or my house or my simple lifestyle. His shame had been about his own fear that being good, being kind, being generous made you vulnerable in a world that rewards selfishness and ambition. But goodness isn't weakness. Kindness isn't naivety. And generosity isn't stupidity. It took my son 35 years and almost losing his family to learn that lesson, but he learned it. The final conversation, the one that convinced me our relationship was truly healed, happened just last week. Michael called me on Sunday afternoon, and I could immediately tell something was wrong. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, son. What's wrong? Sarah's been offered a job in Seattle. It's an incredible opportunity for her, more money, better benefits, a chance to advance her career in ways she can't here in Chicago. My heart sank. Seattle was 2,000 miles away from my grandchildren, from Sunday dinners, from being part of their daily lives. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity for Sarah. Dad, we haven't made any decisions yet. And before we do, I need to know something. If we move to Seattle, would you consider moving there too? What? I'm serious. Dad, I've spent the last 6 months remembering what it means to have you in my life, in our lives. Emma and Jake adore you. Sarah considers you family. And Dad, I need you. I need my father. I was quiet for a long moment, processing what he just said. Michael, are you asking me to uproot my entire life to follow you to Seattle? I'm asking you to consider it. I know it's a huge thing to ask. I know you have your house, your memories of Mom, your whole life here. But Dad, I also know that family is more important than geography. What about the house? What about my life here? We'll help you with the house. We'll help you find a place in Seattle that feels like home. And Dad? Your life isn't here. Your life is with us. It's with your grandchildren and your family and the people who love you. Michael, this is a lot to think about. I know it is. And Dad? If you decide you don't want to move, we'll understand. We'll visit as often as we can, and you'll always be welcome to stay with us for as long as you want. But I hope you'll say yes. Because I've learned something these past few months, Dad. I've learned that having you in our lives doesn't make us look bad or hold us back or embarrass us. Having you in our lives makes us better people. As I write this, I still haven't given Michael my answer about Seattle. But I'm leaning toward yes, not because I'm afraid of losing him again, but because he's right. Family is more important than geography, and love is more important than comfort. 3 years ago, I thought my son was lost to me forever. 3 years ago, I believed that success had turned him into someone incapable of love or respect or basic human decency. But people can change. People can learn. People can remember who they used to be and choose to become that person again. The revenge I took on Michael, destroying his professional reputation, humiliating him in front of his boss, threatening everything he'd worked for, it felt justified at the time. And maybe it was necessary to get his attention, to force him to confront what he'd become. But revenge alone never heals anything. Revenge alone never builds bridges or repairs relationships or teaches anyone to be better. What healed our relationship wasn't the punishment I inflicted on Michael. What healed our relationship was the mercy I showed him afterward, the second chance I gave him, and the faith I demonstrated that he was capable of being better than his worst moments. If there's a lesson in all of this, and there has to be, because otherwise, what was the point of all that pain? It's that love requires both accountability and forgiveness, justice and mercy, the courage to hold people responsible for their actions, and the wisdom to give them the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. Michael hurt me in ways I'll never completely forget. But he also learned from that hurt, grew from it, became a better man because of it. And maybe that's what family really means, not protecting each other from consequences, but helping each other become worthy of the love we share. So if you're watching this from somewhere in the world where family relationships are complicated and painful and full of disappointment, know this: people can change. Love can survive betrayal. Respect can be rebuilt, one small gesture at a time. But it takes courage, the courage to hold people accountable when they hurt you, and the courage to forgive them when they're ready to do better. It takes faith that the people you love are capable of growth, even when they've given you every reason to doubt them. And it takes time to heal, time to rebuild trust, time to learn how to love each other again without losing yourselves in the process. My son beat me up just because I drove roughly. But what I did after that, the revenge I took and the mercy I showed, that changed both of our lives forever. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need our grace the most. And sometimes, giving them that grace is the only way to get back the person we fell in love with in the first place. I'm 66 years old now, and I'm still learning that lesson every day. But I hope, I'm finally starting to get it right. If this story has touched you in any way, if it's reminded you of your own complicated family relationships or given you hope that damaged love can be repaired, please take a moment to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because in the end, we're all just trying to figure out how to love each other better. And sometimes, the best way to do that is to share our stories, the messy, painful, complicated, beautiful stories of how we broke each other's hearts and found ways to heal them again. Thank you for listening to mine.